Okay, and these are some questions that we are gathering in preparation for the main presentation that Jeremy is going to give us. So just a few more Mentimeter questions. The first is, are you posting data to a public site? So I've got yes, no, or pondering it. All right, so we've got yes and pondering it. A couple more yes. Okay. All right. Okay, one no. And how are you doing that? So here's a short answer. Um, so you can type in a solution or an answer. API call, microservices, API, custom WordPress, or Laravel web integrations. Oops, I missed one there. API. And then this next question is, what troubles have you run into? So I guess this could be, yeah, anything really. Right, Jeremy? What would you say you're looking for here? You're
Um,
muted. Oh,
whatever. I I don't remember I don't remember. Let's see what
it
people
could be all
come up
over the
with.
place. Yeah.
Yes,
Bad APIs, recommendation, security, performance, no problems. Good.
that's good though. No problem.
Performance. And what successes have you found? I guess that would be the no problems. Um, many. I guess the success is always when you have it work the way you want it to. Reliability, good. Yeah, I guess what might some of the benefits be of doing it? Mm-hmm. Properly functioning site. All right. Okay. So that completed our questions. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy, who's going to talk to us about FileMaker to Supabase and Supabase to a website. So this is something I know nothing about. So I'm very excited to learn about this and have a conversation and talk more about, yeah, pushing data to the web. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Jeremy, and I will hand it over to you.
Wonderful. All right. Welcome everyone. Make sure, there we go. All right. So today we're going to talk about just working with FileMaker data that needs to be posted somehow to a website, and the workflow that I have sort of come around to or discovered with the help of people, with reading, with AI. I don't, as I go through this, well, you'll see in the next one. The point of what I'm going to talk about today is not to present the authoritative view of things because I am just discovering this myself. I have done now three websites. I'm working on a fourth one that uses this model that I'm going to demonstrate. And every time I try it, I um, get better at it. I find more interesting ideas, best practices. So yeah, this is going to be just an exploration of where I'm at this moment, starting from like the catalyst that got this going, and then again to where I'm at today. I'll show you some examples of current clients that I'm working with right now that where I'm using this model. So don't think that this is the end all and be all. There is probably, as has been told to me There's probably too many moving parts within this, but I think that's the fun of being able to share it, to hear thoughts from you, and see what I can do to collapse things to make things more efficient. But I don't actually mind too many moving parts if I know them and they make sense and I can replicate them the next time. So that's where we're at. As we talk, as I share, just if you have a question, put it up in the chat. I've got the chat window easily accessible. I can see it, and interrupt with questions or comments about what's going on here. So I want to start off with the tech stack of what I'm using, and it's going to grow as we go through this. But I work with a lot of different partners around the community as a single business owner, and one of them I work with iSolutions a little bit, and they really learn. One of their people there, Eden Morris, really turned me on to using Next.js for building websites. Next.js is a React-based framework. Their tagline is everything you need to build great products on the web. And I've really come around to using this framework here. They have a site called Vercel, Fabia, that it's tightly integrated between what I'm building and what I'm hosting. So I can start a project in Next.js in VS Code, and I can easily deploy it to Vercel without any run around or anything. So I'm really a fan of this. There's a lot of discussion about which is the best app framework to use. I don't really care. I just use this because I know it and it works. So yeah, so that's where I'm at. I love using the web viewer, but obviously this doesn't fit in. Next.js won't really work in a web viewer because Next.js is an app router based system where you build pages and you build buttons that navigate to those pages. And so it doesn't really work in the web viewer. But there's a lot of discussion on Twitter about it, but whatever. This is what I'm using. And of course, I'm using FileMaker. So the purpose of our talk today, of course, is to talk about taking data that's in FileMaker and moving it to a website, either a public website or a authenticated site where you know who your users are. So this started all about a year and a half ago when I was getting into Next.js and learning how to use it. I was learning how to use, again, as different business services that I use. I was learning how to use Typeform and bringing and then Zapier and then bringing the stuff from Typeform into FileMaker. And then I was working with Next.js. So I was like, I want to build a site that shows some JS and FM JavaScript libraries. People in the JS and FM community would submit their favorite libraries to Typeform. They would go to FileMaker, and then I built this site to go get the data and push it on a website. So every button that you see in there in the top, the navigation there was a fetch to FileMaker using the FileMaker data API to go get the data. So there's only 33 records altogether. So when you click on user interface there, you see maybe 6 or 7 records. And I was really proud of this. Here's the data actually. So this is where the data comes from. I was really proud that I got this whole workflow set up. Turns out I don't even need FileMaker, but we'll get into that later. But this was my workflow, and I was really proud of how this set up, and I distributed it to the people in my community and asked them to contribute and look at this. And yeah, it made me feel top of the world. And then I showed it to some people in another Slack channel, and I said, "Hey, check this out, see what it's about." They asked me about it, and boy, did I get roasted for this. Um, that might be a little bit too strong of a word, but it sure felt like it at the time. I built this site to fetch data from FileMaker, and that was not the right way to go. It was not the right way to go. And we'll talk about that. And I hope to hear from you about why that may or may not be the right way. What I should have done is be more thoughtful, But what I should have done really is I should have built a site using Next.js that statically generates the web page at runtime. So Next.js has a model called static site generation where it can go, you can write all the JavaScript, all the code to go fetch the data. And then when you deploy it, the Next.js will go fetch the data one time, and it will then construct all the divs and all the images and all that stuff. And it will create a full HTML page with little to no JavaScript in it. And the data will be static inside the site. It doesn't, or it's not going to be fetched in real time. So when a user comes to this site, they're not going to get the data in real time. That makes sense for a lot of uses. That library thing that I built, the JS and FM libraries thing, it should have been this. It should have been a static site where it just goes and fetches the data and all of the data that has been collected and then post it here. That works really nicely. I was actually interested in pushing myself and learning how to do the fetching and all the stuff, building a FileMaker data API query and all that stuff. But this is what I should have done. And then they do have a way in Next.js to push an update to your site. So I could have built my FileMaker file with a button that says, hey, go collect all the records in this table and then push them up to the site. Then the Next.js site would say, oh, you're triggering me to add some more divs or remove some divs. So I'm going to regenerate the page and then serve it to people who come to your URL. So that was an interesting idea. And I have actually done that a few times, but I wanted to do this live fetching. So again, being roasted, it was fine. It was good fun. And it was by people that I respect and care about their opinion and know that they are smarter than me in that. So I was okay with that. But here's where I started to think about the reasons, and I asked for help with the reasons. Why would you not want to use FileMaker as a data source, direct data source for websites? Let's just start with that premise. If you have any responses, any thoughts about why, speak up or throw them in the chat, and we'll see if we can collect some here. It can be slow. So connecting to FileMaker can be slow. Yep. All right. Anything else? Here, I'll continue on. Here are the reasons that I guess I discovered it's not scalable or reliable. Single point of failure. Good. Yes. Single point of failure is very important. Working with iSolutions, we've had times when FileMaker server goes down or a SSL certificate is expired and we can't fetch the data. So yeah, it's been a problem. So here are some reasons that I have heard from other people and just come up with myself. I don't think, this is my understanding, and let's refine it, talk about it, but I don't think FileMaker server can handle website hits. It probably could handle if you have 5 users logging in per day. You know, there are specific authenticated users, they have authorization to get to certain records. It could probably handle that just fine. But when you're posting data to a public site, like a product page or something, I don't think FileMaker server can handle that. Does anybody disagree with that or have instances where it can handle that? Is there a spec that would be necessary for that? I don't know. Speak up, interrupt me if you do. But that's my understanding. Dealing with API calls in a website to FileMaker is a pain. And for me, I put in parentheses, having to handle the token and refreshing it and not letting it expire is just a pain in the butt. Working with other people, they have built all of that stuff for me, so I could just use hooks in React to go fetch data, and then it would handle the refresh on its own or for me. But someone had to build that stuff. If FileMaker server is down, so is the site. Tim said even bots could take down the FileMaker based site. Yep, and it could certainly take down the server. And this was important. This is something that we ran into many times. If a FileMaker script or layout changes, the data can't be retrieved. If you have hard code, because you have to hard code at some point, right? You have to hard code a script name or a layout name in your JavaScript in your site. If someone changes that layout or deletes it, you're sunk. So there's issues that we have to take care of. And FileMaker Server just doesn't seem to be able to handle this. People have always told me you need to have something in the middle between FileMaker and between a website. So that JSON-FM docs site doesn't live anymore. I just pulled up the development version of it. It is gone from the web. I didn't want anybody to take down my server or cause me to go over my data API limit or whatever the case may be. So that's gone. So started to work with exploring, okay, well, how do you do this? How do you have something in the middle between FileMaker and a website? For some reason, I'm getting into doing that for people. My focus has been focusing on the web viewer and web widgets, but for some reason, I'm doing this now. So I wanted to think about all of the factors. And here are the factors that I could think of that require some deliberate sort of middleware, something in the middle between FileMaker and the website. So first thing is we need to handle the data properly. If we're building a cache of FileMaker data, we're opening up a whole host of problems. A lot more maybe than I even have here, but it certainly is a problem to deal with. So either I let my website be taken down by bots or by FileMaker server being down, or I handle it. I handle a bunch of other problems. Getting the data to the cache, to the middleware initially, deleting data, adding new records, but not all of them, just some of the ones that have just been added, updating existing records, knowing which records to add, knowing which records to update, delete, dealing with documents and images. That's part of many FileMaker apps. Dealing with site edit of records. So if someone deals with edits a record on the site, because they've logged in and need to change their address or something, getting that data back to FileMaker. And then, of course, authentication, authorization, whichever one is the one that I need to deal with at the moment, allowing users to see their own data. So these are just, I think, some of the factors that we have to consider when working with, and I considered when working with some sort of data cache. Apparently caching is hard, but I think, and because I've experienced this many times now, I think that the pain points that we create by using a cache outweigh the problems. Sorry, the fact that our data is more secure, more accessible to a website helps to ease these problems out. Yes, I'm going to have to deal with all these, but I know my data can be hit. The database where the data is stored can be hit many, many times, and I'm not going to get a failure on my FileMaker server. So the solution for me and for, again, talking with people and reading and learning, watching videos was to use Supabase as a database middleware. Postgres, it's a Postgres database. It's a front end for Postgres, and it allows me to create a whole database structure inside of their service that then my website can be attached to and allow hits to happen, public or authenticated. So Supabase allows me to do all of this stuff. I can transfer data from FileMaker to Supabase. So I've got part of those factors covered where I can get data in there using the insert from URL. Supabase has some webhooks capabilities so that when records are edited on the site and then submitted back to the database, they can be immediately transferred to FileMaker. It has some authorization techniques that allows me to prevent data from being seen by anybody, and it has a storage place. So the solution again was Supabase. I stumbled on it, and people that I'm working with are using it, and so this became kind of my favorite thing to use, and I'm getting better at it. And trying to understand it more. I spend a lot of time learning about it and watching videos. So here's some of the highlights of it. I just mentioned those. But it seems in my 3 or 4 site experience so far, it seems to give me everything that I need to be able to create a site that is data driven, that comes from FileMaker, and give all the proper security measures and all the anything else that a site would possibly need. So here's the workflow. And again, if you have any questions, any thoughts, please speak up. Is anybody using Supabase? I haven't heard of it being used much in our community yet. Is anybody using it? No. Tim, you're not using it? No. Okay. Anybody using like just a plain old Postgres database, or maybe you've got direct access into the Postgres model, I'm not sure, or Firebase is one, MySQL. Sam, you've used it for creating a web app once. Okay. All right, so here's my workflow, and we're going to break it down into different parts: the data, the users, and the site. Mostly Postgres, MySQL, and Postgres. Okay, so Tim, you are going past Supabase. I think it's kind of the same thing. It's a Postgres. I have to learn Postgres. I have to learn SQL calls and in the Postgres model. All right, so here's the data. So when it comes to working with data, I'm working with another group that I'm building a website for. Here's a product record, and this product record needs to get pushed up to the site, to the database cache, so that a public site can show a record. So the record here is in JSON here. You can see there on the right side, I've got all the field names there. I had to construct that JSON from scratch because the field names in the actual table was a little bit different than what is required by or asked for by Supabase. No spaces, no capital letters for some reason. Maybe I read that wrong somewhere, but that's kind of the model that I've been using. So my record is here. And then the way that I'm structuring this is anytime one of the source fields gets edited on this page or by any process, that little flag field at the bottom triggers to 1. Josh Ormond taught me a cool technique where you put in the auto enter calculation. You do a trigger. I forget the exact calculation, but it's actually looking at the as JSON field, and it's saying, does any of those values get updated because they come from one of the fields on the left? If so, trigger this to be 1 so that I know this record needs to be updated at the end of the day or whenever that happens. So this is how I know. Oh, and this also, of course, that super update flag field gets updated when the record is created, of course, because it's an auto enter calc. So I think I'm able to capture the records that have been edited. If a field on the left side were edited, but it's not part of that JSON object, then I don't care about it because only those fields are the ones that I care about for the site. So I know now which records to update. Okay. I have a script now that pushes. This is the final product of the script. I'll show you some other examples in a minute, but this is a script called sync products that I use to send the data up to Supabase. This script goes and finds all of the records online. If you can see on about line 27, 28, 29, it goes and finds all those records in the table that need to be updated, that have that little flag field checked. And it will then run through a process of preparing that found set of records for push up to date to Supabase. When I was first doing this, I wrote this script. I've written probably 7 versions of this script since I started. The first couple versions were let's go find all the records. Let's loop through each record, and then let's push each record individually up to Supabase. If it was a new record, use the post mechanism. If it was an update, wait, no, a post needs that too. What am I thinking? Or up, it was really tough to figure this out. I had to know if the record was new or if the record was just being edited. Finally learned that I don't have to do, if this table had 1,000, if this table had 1,500 product edits in a day, the first time I was doing this, I was hitting my Supabase cache 1,500 times, one for each record. And I finally learned, okay, I can construct it all as an array. And because I have the ID of the record match in both systems, I can just push all of it up there. All the new records gets created and all the edited records gets changed. All the records gets changed. I'm sure that's pretty common for systems. I discovered it as I was reading through Supabase and understanding it. So this one script, there's a couple subscripts, but this one main script will sync all the product records every single day. Here's at the end of the day, this is the script that runs, sync to Supa, that just goes through all of the tables that need to be synced. It goes up in line 4 and grabs the Supabase credentials first and then passes it to all the subscripts. The subscripts look like this, and then there's a bunch of subscripts. Here's a subscript. It was called Add or Update Record Revised. I've had many versions of this where I'm taking it in and I'm just passing it into another script. I'm prepping it for surgery posting up there. And then the next script continues to take it, process it, extract out what it needs. It constructs a request JSON variable in line 15. And then I love using Todd's HTTP request script to actually do the insert from URL using the curl structure. So this is my go-to way of doing it. It only causes me to tear my hair out when I have to do something new. It drives me nuts when I have to do something new. But right now, I don't have to. I just pass up the data. I pass up the right URL, the key, all that stuff, and it just works. So line 22 there is the script that does all the work of taking all my data and passing it up. And then the final part of each of the syncs are to get the response back and then process the records if the response was good. So with this script, I'm able to again process any records that were edited or were new in the last 24 hours. I thought about doing some kind of hash thing where I would store the hash of the record up on Supabase, and then I would bring it down and compare it to the hash of the record right at the moment and see if they're the same. If they're the same, skip over it. But I just decided I'm going to do it this trigger method and call it a day. So that was very useful to be able to have that trigger define which records need to be pushed. I used to have, let's see, there we go. I used to have a ton of scripts that would do one of these things, add or update customer, add multiple customers. There was just a lot of mess in the versioning of my scripts. You can see a bunch of old scripts. It was just a mess. So don't use any of these anymore. I'm down to just like 6 scripts, one per table that needs to be updated. And of course, I could easily, if I wanted to, refactor this to use the same script every single time and just pass in the name of the table, because you can see there on line 14 there, you need the name of the table that is up in Supabase for this to work. That's the only difference between all of these. Well, I guess the other difference, of course, is the context. So I think I came to the right level of refactorization there by just having one script per table. It's not a big deal to have one script per table. So yeah, I'm down to a couple scripts to do the work. So let's see here. I got lost here. Okay, so here's my adder update. I mentioned this earlier. The Up in Supabase there at the bottom left there is the table with the FMID field. Its value matches the one that's in the highlight above. Notice that the field names are wrong. I wish I hadn't done that. Yeah, it was a big mistake and something I'm loath to fix because I'd have to change it all over the place. So I'm just leaving it. But actually, in the JSON there, you can see on the right side the key name is the right name. So this gives me all the content. This gives me the ability to Supabase will upsert it's called, where it'll take a bunch of records. It'll push them up. If it sees a record in the FMID that matches one of the records in my push, then it's just going to edit the record. It's just going to put the values in their proper place. If it doesn't see a record in Supabase with the 4184423 ID, then it's going to add it as new. So that was a great discovery that I found as I was doing this. Because adding or updating was just a pain the script was a mess. You probably all have never written messy scripts or done multiple versions of one, but I certainly had to do based on what I learned there. So the users, let's talk about the users a bit. So that's the workflow for the data. Any questions on the data workflow?
So were you saying that feature to add or update is something built into Supabase?
It is, yeah. It can upsert. It's called upsert, yeah. And
Okay.
Tim, is that a common thing for Postgres databases? That you know, or MySQL databases? Is anybody, Fabio, does anybody know?
Not in, I mean, we would do that in FileMaker, keep track of what has to be pushed up, and we wouldn't normally rely on the, in our case, we've used MySQL for this, and we wouldn't normally rely on MySQL to make that assessment. That
Okay.
sounds like an interesting feature.
Yeah. Tim, are you there? When you get here, I don't know. I've only experienced the work with Supabase, so I don't know if it's common or not. So, Tim, oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Can you repeat what you're asking? I was just away for a second.
Sorry. Yeah. So Supabase has the ability to upsert, add or update records. Is that a common Postgres MySQL thing?
Yeah, well, I think it's common with most external databases, right?
Okay. FileMaker doesn't have that, does it? We can't. I don't know. I don't know. It does? Okay, cool. So anyway, I just go ahead.
I mean, in the sense that you can do an import and use the update, the matching fields function, and it will either update or insert the data that you're importing. And I haven't seen that in MySQL. So
okay. Well, I discovered it, and it's a brand new thing for me, so it's kind of cool. All right, so let's go through the users. The users, here's how I've structured this. So this is my Supabase testing table project that I'm working with. Has a couple tables on the left. One of the tables is the users. So as the database administrator, because this is coming from FileMaker, I send the authorized user. Oh, Fabio, you did something with DynamoDB, but it's a bit different. Okay. All right. At the end, why don't you, if you want to, you can explain that. So Supabase I have to have a table of, the way that I'm doing this, I have a table of records, users called users, that will have access to records inside of the other tables. So you can see there on the far right, there's an FM ID. That's their primary key back in FileMaker. It's just did that. And then any records in the sales data table here that are assigned to each user, they have access to. So I'll show you that in a minute. But I have a table of users. When a user comes to, when one of the users that are intended to use the site comes to the site, they sign up and they put in their email. The emails in the users table has to match what they're providing here, because then Supabase will hold their account in an authentication section of Supabase. It will give them a user ID there on the far right, And this is where all the authentication happens. This is the first point in authenticating somebody when they sign in after that. Supabase has a lot of great features. The provider that I'm choosing is email, but just like everywhere else, you can use Apple Pay, GitHub, whatever you want, AWS, to allow some authorization. So this is that. So once a user signs up to goes through the process of signing up, like my Jeremy at integratingmagic.io, that user ID over on the far right, I have a little function inside of Supabase that goes and finds that user in the users table that came from FileMaker and gives them a Supabase ID. So that Supabase ID on the right there, that becomes their Supabase primary key that will make sure that they're authenticated to use this site. So now I can use the combination of the Supabase ID and the FileMaker ID to authenticate and then to go find the records that they are allowed to see. So that's kind of the process. And I think if someone were to come to this site that used an email that we didn't intend for them to use, I would have a page that says, hey, this email doesn't match what we know of you. You're not an authenticated user. Please call the main site and the main company and ask for clarification. So that is a little bit weird I have to match based on the email, and that can be a little tough for users, I think, in the long run. So I don't know. It's something to explore. I'm going to be exploring it in a new project. All right, so that's that. So they're assigned an auth ID and then they're used. So now, when a person comes to the website, they will be able to. They can log in. We will check in here for their Supabase ID. We will get their FileMaker ID, that FM ID, and then we will allow them to get the records out of the tables that they're interested in that match their FM ID. So just like we would do with some security privileges, we would only send the records to the website that match their ID. I'll show you that. I'll show you samples of that in a minute. Here's what Supabase does for row level security. When you first create a table, all the data is locked down. No data can be fetched from the site. You can either make all of the data public in a specific table, or you can use this policy, let them enable read access for authenticated users. And here I just wrote a little SQL statement that allows me to go and get their FileMaker ID, go get the FileMaker ID of the record that matches the Supabase's ID when they log in. I'm not trying to get detailed about it, but this is a nice way for me to write it. And actually, they have a lot of great AI to help me create these policies and apply them to specific tables. So the site in the JavaScript code. So this is where, again, it's going to get a little confusing, but I'll try to be pretty simple. So on a public website, any of the authentication, the fetching of the data needs to be at a level that users cannot access it by right-clicking on the web viewer and the browser and looking at any source code. We can't expose any keys in here. So Next.js has this idea of a server component, a server file that where all of the code where all of the fetching happens. So all of the data happens at the server level where we can't access it, a user can't access it. So here's just 3 examples of me. The first one, number 1, I am going to see if the person who logged in with their email and their password actually has a record in the authenticated site. If they do, great. If not, I'm going to redirect them to the sign-in page and prevent them from going anywhere else. The second one is me looking up their, in this case, a subscription. I want to check, do they have an active subscription to the particular site that I'm building? If they do have a record in there using this SQL statement, then good. If not, I'm going to redirect them to a subscribe page so that they can pay us money to have access to the site. And then the third one there, finally, if the code has gotten this far, I'm just going to go fetch the data. I'm going to go fetch the users, the records where the record ID matches the one who's logged in, and get their full name at the bottom. So this is just a quick example of me doing 3 different steps to fetch data and make sure that the user continues to have access along the way. Okay. Then when it comes to fetching data, this is a site I'll show you in a minute, but I'm building a site for someone who fetches NFL stats for each game of each week so that people can do some comparisons and see the results and make maybe a prediction about something. So once the person is authenticated, once I know they have a subscription, once I know they have a user record, now I'm going to build a query on that very first line. And all the following stuff after that is using some query params in the URL to define each field's limit of values to return. So this is all messy. There's a lot of information here, a lot of if statements. But I'm basically saying, okay, if the person chose, let's see here, like near the bottom there, it says if search params dot week number. If they choose a week number and that value is in a query inside of the URL, then I'm going to add to the query that I'm building in subsequent steps. I'm going to add to that URL, that query, a week number criteria in the find. So there's a lot here. And then finally, many lines down, I go and fetch the data right here in this. Okay, so I'm fetching the data and I'm putting that data into a variable and then I'm using it. So this is a lot and it took me a while to get it, but it's about, again, making sure the person can access this site, if not direct them elsewhere. Okay, they do have access to it. Now I'm going to go fetch the data that they are allowed to have. In this case, once they have a subscription, they're allowed to have all of the data. There is no separation by user, by like a FileMaker ID. So here I'll show you the products that I'm kind of talking through right now, and so you can kind of see what I'm doing. The first one is this one here. This one is my sales data site. This was just a test that I built as a proof of concept. I log in. If I spell my name right. Yep, I thought so. Okay, hold on. Come on. There we go. Okay. So I have authenticated myself with my correct password. Now when I come here, there's a lot of records in this table that came from FileMaker. I'm only allowed to see some of them. I'm only allowed to see the records in the 30s, product 30, 31, so forth. So this allows me to fetch the data. And now I'm fetching the data from the Supabase database. I'm using all of their row level security. I'm using a fetch that is specifically tied to their syntax. And I'm using tokens and refreshing that Supabase with their JavaScript libraries are handling all by themselves. I don't have to worry about it. I just access a function, I pass the query to that function, and it handles all of the refreshing for me. So this is allowing me to present data to a client without any problems, and only their data. Up here, just note that here's where my parameters are being stored. I love this idea so much. I love this idea so much. I love being able to put the parameters of the find inside of the URL and then use that in the fetching mechanism that is built into the site. There's a lot of great reasons for this. Number one, I could copy this and I could send it to somebody and they could see the exact same data once they've logged in. That's nice. I can use the back arrow to update the query. It's just a beautiful mechanism for working with finds. Love that idea. I have heard that there is a URL limit. I haven't reached it yet in all of the work that I've been doing, even the more complex ones. So I'll show you that in a minute. But this is a nice mechanism. This in this case allows me to edit the records and then send this value back to Supabase. It actually gets sent back to FileMaker. Don't have time to show that now, but it is this 438 did get posted back to the web to the original FileMaker file from where it came. Here's another one. This is the example of the public site that I'm currently building. We've got some dealers that are available for anybody to look at. And someone can come in here and type in a zip code. These are based in the Oklahoma area. So they can type that in and go fetch the data for those records that are closest to 73019 based on a radius. So once we see a dealer that we're interested in to find some sheds, we can come here. All of these records were in that product table that I showed earlier. They get pushed up to Supabase once a day, and they are here available for the public to view. And again, all of this data is on Supabase and allows me to see all the information. The images are stored in Supabase. Supabase has its own storage mechanism, and I built a script to push images up to Supabase, their storage, using that HTTP request script. So yeah, so it's all stored there. This does have a login, and so this got a little tricky because part of my site, the site is public, part of the site is authenticated, so I had to deal with that and just manage the two different parts of the site. Obviously, an authenticated user can look at these, but a public could not. Good question, Peter. I'm curious about returning data to FileMaker. Did it send to FileMaker first and then updated Supabase, or did it update Supabase first? Which then it did the latter. So I'm always pushing to Supabase because I only have a connection to Supabase. Supabase has a webhook that immediately can push it back to FileMaker. And yeah, I haven't handled the idea, what if FileMaker server is down? I haven't handled that yet. It's on my mind, but I need to figure out how to handle that. So Supabase will try to push many times and then it'll just give up. I need to explore that more. But yeah, it's only to Supabase. So and then back to FileMaker. And that's what is happening here. It's not working right now, but they can request a quote, fill in a form, that data gets pushed back to FileMaker so that a user there can know, hey, I've got a quote to work with. And then finally, here's what I think is my crowning glory just in the past couple of weeks. This is the subscription site that I'm building for someone. We'll just start at the beginning here. I should have done that. Save the cool stuff. It's called Stat Gems. Funny story. Client came to me and said, hey, I've got some text here. Can you put this on the homepage? And I'm like, yeah, we don't have a homepage yet, but yeah, I'll create it. So I ran his text through AI and it produced a perfect homepage site for me. So it was great. All right, so the user can subscribe if they haven't. They can sign in if they have. And again, if I just create a fake email, it's going to tell me that it's failed. It's also, if I log in and I don't have a subscription, it's going to tell me that, and it's going to make me subscribe before I have access to the actual data. So here's the actual data. All this data comes from FileMaker. My client has it. It's a local file. I built him some scripts that he put into his file, and he just pushes up data at the end of every week when he gets the data back. But users can go over here and select a team over here or multiple teams. And this is fetching from Supabase in real time. It's all fetching from the server mechanism. So none of the keys, the Supabase credentials are exposed. It's all kosher as I'm understanding it. So yeah, so this was built over the past couple of months with his data and just being able to try to present it in a nice way. So this was a lot of fun because I had to deal with all that subscription stuff using Stripe, checking to see if Stripe has a subscription for this user. If not, make them pay for it and so forth. So this gives me the chance to explore and the person can come in here and change. They can go to their portal in Stripe, I think. They can come to the portal and make changes and do whatever they need to do there. So this was a lot of fun to put together. Yeah, so those are three examples of how I'm using FileMaker, how I'm using Supabase to bridge between FileMaker and a website. Nevermore will I get roasted for using fetching from FileMaker directly. I'll probably get roasted for other things, but not specifically for that, which I consider a win. I consider a good learning opportunity, something that I've learned pretty well. So yeah, just I know we got a couple of seconds left here. I'll show one last thing here. Just my integration of Supabase. This is Supabase in all of its glory. It's free. It's got different tiers of projects and things that you can build. Tim. Yeah. Just a second, Tim. So Supabase has the tables here. This is my customer, the shed database. I've got all the data here. I do have sensitive data in here, at least lease information for customers and customer information. But because this is secure, I have to log in to use it, then I feel confident that that's okay. My authentication happens here. I've got some storage happening where all the shed images are stored. And then I know the URL of each image, so I add that to the product record, and then I send that up to Supabase. It's in the tables. The tables are fun. It takes a lot of. It's funny how my FileMaker skills are really helping me, but they're also hindering me because I don't need to set up relationships here. I'm building the relationships on the fly using SQL. Thank you that we have the execute SQL statement to practice SQL, I guess. I don't have to build any sort of relationships if I don't want to. It's really nice to be able to just have discrete tables that have the relationship information, but not actually have to draw things to be used. I really like that. One last thing I'll show here. It does two last things, sorry. So it does have a nice SQL editor where I can actually use AI to help me do anything. I can create tables. I can create a row level security that prevents Tim Simbura from using this site or accessing any data. I can ask it to do it over here. It'll construct the function or the SQL call or whatever it is, and then it will actually add it to the structure of this system. And then the last thing is really nice is for databases, they have something called functions, which I really like this idea. So I can create a function. I've got a function down here got called get customer info. This is a view. They call them views basically. It's a view of the data that I can actually call from the site itself. So rather than saying, hey, this customer is logged in, I want you to go get all their lease records, their payment records, their customer information. All I'm going to do is call this function, get customer info from my site, and that will take the authenticated user's ID and it will go fetch the data in a nice JSON object. So it's a nice way to create a view, construct a view that is universal. It just changes by the authenticated user ID. I don't have to do 7 different calls to get all the data. I can do one call and get a record of all of the properly constructed related data. Tim asked a question, and we'll see if we can do the breakouts. How is FileMaker adding value in this scenario? Couldn't you do the whole thing in Supabase? Yes. In fact, going back to that site that I built that I got roasted about, the library docs, I was going from Typeform to FileMaker to the website. What I really should do now is I should go Typeform to Supabase to the website. Forget FileMaker. But as I look at that pattern, I could actually I could skip Typeform altogether. I could construct my own form on my site, which writes data to Supabase and then is available for the viewing of Supabase, the actual site. So FileMaker isn't adding any value except for if clients are already using FileMaker, and that's where the administrators of the company work in. They are using the data, they're accessing it, seeing what has been added, what's been removed, and so forth from the public site. Is that an answer, Tim? Do you have another answer?
I didn't. I mean, so you're using FileMaker as just another view into the information to maybe create some custom reports or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or it is the main workhorse of the administrators
Okay.
who have accounts until I convince them to let me build them a admin portal. Yeah, we still need FileMaker because that's where the layouts and the scripts are located. But yeah. So I think it's 100% worth the effort of setting this up. Luckily, I've got a script template now that I can use. I know how Supabase is working now. I think it's worth the trouble of setting this up to protect the FileMaker file, the server, the data there. Let Supabase be the cache, and then let the data the website pull from that actual cache. For me, it's a profound insight and a profound idea. I realize it's 100% common for most people who have been doing this a long time. But for me, as I come up here in this new stuff, I am excited about it. I love using this idea. So every website I build from now on where the data comes from FileMaker, I will insist to my clients that we need a piece of middleware if they wanting me to build a website that shows that FileMaker data. So, and actually, one last thing, because I've been working with Supabase for a long time, I looked at my JavaScript and FileMaker community and I go, this is just a database. I just realized that this interface here is just showing me data from a very complex database structure, but it's probably Postgres on the back end or SQL. I love that idea. I'm actually thinking maybe I could build my own community and stop paying for this service and just build my own. But yeah, so there we go. So that is my experiments working with Supabase. I've learned a lot from this. I'll do last share here. I've learned a lot from this, have a lot more to learn. Here's the stuff that I've learned. The first one is the most important for me. I've decided that Supabase by default will create a ID field that is incremental. It just auto increments by one. That's fine. But because this is FileMaker data, actually, I decided that I want the FileMaker primary key to also be the Supabase primary key ID. So I don't have to do any gymnastics to match any records up. And that's actually what allows me to do the upsert. If I know that the primary key in Supabase is the primary key of the records in FileMaker, I'm good to go. Supabase credentials inside of FileMaker. I don't know the best solution for this yet. Right now, they're in a script. That's probably not a great idea. Probably a custom function is a better idea. I know other people have put the credentials on a separate site, have had FileMaker insert from URL to get that stuff back, and then use it in the flow. Keeping things in sync has been kind of challenging. How to write SQL is tough. It's driving me nuts, but luckily there are great sites out there that help me with that. So the possibilities are amazing with this. I've mentioned some already. It feels like I could build any site with it and really work with data in a fast way. And by the way, I didn't mention this, but Supabase, fetching from Supabase is so much faster than FileMaker. I'm still coming up with the best practices, and maybe in our further discussion, we can talk about that. But those are my next steps, is to continue to refine my understanding of this, find ways that I can pull out moving parts in what I'm doing. And, you know, I don't want to refactor too crazy, but I want to see if there's other more places that I can refactor and make it a little bit less complex. All right, that is it for me. I'd love to talk about this, so let's talk about it.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Thank you. That was awesome. And yeah, let's just hang on, everybody, because we will continue talking because I know I have some questions. I'm going to share a few more screens and then we're going to do the breakout session. So don't go anywhere, anybody. So let's see. Just a reminder, if you want to speak at a future meetup, we are open to having anybody come and talk. So please just submit your idea. I think Brandon just posted a link with a form to fill out if you want to submit an idea. And then as a reminder, we're going to move the GraphQL presentation will be October 16th. That's our next meetup. Then we have a QuickBooks hack with Jillian Harmon on November 20th, and we won't meet up in December. So that's our plan for the rest of the year. And with that, Brandon's going to set up the breakout sessions, and then we can continue discussing. So